Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing an interesting question, and that is whether or not the 24-25 San Jose Sharks are tanking. Now, over these last couple of seasons, the first 2 years of Mike Grier's tenure as San Jose Sharks general manager, it has been no secret that the Sharks haven't exactly been trying to win a lot of games. Sure, the players and the coaching staff have been trying, though at times this past season it may not have looked like it, but Mike Grier has been building these teams to lose more games than they are supposed to win. And we could see that immediately from the first offseason when he took over. Yeah, he made a couple of small moves to get a couple of players that he liked, like Nico Sturm coming over in free agency or trading for Luke Kunin, but the big move that overshadowed all of those small ones was the Brent Burns trade, the first big contract that Mike Grier would end up trading away from the San Jose Sharks. And the deal was not all that great. He didn't really get much back in return, probably one of his worst trades as San Jose Sharks general manager, but it accomplished his goal rather well. I made a video that offseason discussing whether or not the San Jose Sharks had actually gotten worse in that 2022 offseason, and I had come to the conclusion that they in fact did get worse, and that exactly ended up being the case for the following year. They went from finishing 11th last in 2022 to 4th last in 2023, getting themselves the 4th overall pick, and they were only a couple of points separating them and the Anaheim Ducks for last place. Going into the 2023 offseason, again, much of the same thing. During the year, they had traded away Timo Meier in a very successful deal, and in 2023, they traded away Erik Karlsson, a 101-point defenseman, to again have the team get worse for the following season, and worse they got once again. They didn't just finish in the bottom 5 with a 4th last finish, they were dead last in the league, and not only that, they had the worst season in modern NHL history with just 47 points, not even managing to hit the 20-win mark. It was essentially the rock bottom for the franchise. But now we look at these first few weeks of this current offseason, 2024. Obviously, things are not yet finished, so you never know what may end up happening. But we can once again ask the question whether or not the Sharks have actually gotten worse or if they have gotten better. Do the additions outweigh the subtractions? Because there were a few players who have left: Barabanov, LeBanc, Mike Hoffman, Kyle Burroughs. But realistically, these are kind of minor players. They didn't really have that much of an impact with the San Jose Sharks this past season. If we take a look at the additions, there were the two big signings of Tyler Toffoli and Alex Wennberg through free agency, and then another two big signings, which of the Sharks rookies, Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, out of the NCAA. It seems quite clear, along with the acquisition of Jake Wallman on defense, that the San Jose Sharks should be a better team going into this next season. And so if your definition of tanking is the team has made moves to get worse during the offseason compared to a team making moves to get better, then technically this San Jose Sharks team is not trying to tank for the following year. Which of course then brings up the next question. If the Sharks aren't tanking, should they be? Is this actually a smart move for them? Because technically, you know, we look back at this past season, it was a grueling year, very tough, 6 months of just constant losses, it felt like, but because of that, they finished last place, they had the best possible draft lottery odds, and they ended up drafting Macklin Celebrini. So it was technically a win for the franchise, and with the benefit of hindsight here, we can say that it was worth it. And so looking forward, you might be very tempted to do the same exact thing for another year, another couple years, another 3 years to try and get these first overall picks. Even if you don't necessarily win the draft lottery, you'll end up with a top 3 selection guaranteed if you finish last place. That definitely is a very tempting offer, but the fact is that life is not exactly like a video game. In a video game, you can just have your team in NHL tank 5 seasons in a row because you can just skip by that in 15-20 minutes. Oh, let's get to 2028 where my team is actually suddenly very, very good with all of my first overall talent. In real life, when you decide to tank a season, you have to go day after day slowly through the process, a painstakingly agonizing time as you you watch the team lose. As someone who watched all 82 games this past season, I can say that it was quite tough to deal with, and I was simply just a spectator. By the end of the game, I would make my video, of course, but then I could just move on with my life. For the Sharks players who are actually involved, that's not the same case. They have to show up to the rink every single day, knowing in the back of their minds, if not in the front of their minds, that they're almost certainly going to lose the next game that they suit up for, basically entirely out of their control. And these players, to make it to the NHL, not only had to be incredibly skilled, but they also had to be hyper competitive. These players absolutely hate to lose. And so for them to be on a team that is designed to lose and is going to lose for the next 3-4 seasons if the Sharks did take that tanking route is incredibly demoralizing, demotivating, and can also create not only a culture of losing, but a lot of bad habits in those players' games. If you know you're going to be down 1-0, 2-0, what's your sort of motivation to actually play defensively in those particular games? So especially for the younger players who are only just jumping into the NHL, look at someone like William Eklund this past season, who has now played pretty much the entirety of his NHL career, since it's been so short, on a very, very bad team. That's the type of thing that could really get them off to a wrong start to their career. On top of that, it is not simply just the sort of motivation of going through a season as a player, but you also have to look at the San Jose Sharks as a business. They are a business above all else, which is something that is very easy to forget. And as a business, the San Jose Sharks do need to make money. And over these past 5 seasons, with the Sharks being as bad as they have, they've had their issues doing that. And who could really blame the fans? Many NHL teams get most of their dollars from merchandise sales, from memorabilia sales, and primarily from ticket sales from fans going to their games. But who could really blame San Jose Sharks fans to not want to go to the game of a team on a Tuesday night against the Tampa Bay Lightning where they're just going to get absolutely blown out 6-1? It's just not exciting. There is very little factors that have actually existed for San Jose Sharks fans to get them through the doors of the arena over these last 5 years. And so, imagine a world in which the San Jose Sharks, they didn't sign Toffoli, they didn't acquire Jake Wallman, and as such, maybe Celebrini and Will Smith weren't as incentivized to actually sign their first professional contracts with the Sharks, and they headed back to the NCAA, and instead San Jose just took the minimal amount of measures to hit that cap floor and went into next season like that. Sharks fans are not really going to show up in droves to watch yet another season in which they just get absolutely pummeled. Even if they truly believe that it is the correct choice, I don't have to sit by and watch it be the correct choice. I can just say, you know what, I'll check back in a year's time or a couple of years' time when they have a couple more first overall picks. Instead, with Celebrini on the team, with Will Smith on the team, suddenly fans have a vested interest in how this team is actually going to do. These are the two most exciting prospects that this franchise has had in many, many, many years. And so now it is definitely going to be a popular team, or at least a slightly more popular team than it has been over these past few years. So if you are a general manager, you have an incredibly thin line to walk, where you're having to manage the short term with how your team is doing financially and in the standings and player-wise within the next couple of years, but you also have to try to manage the long term, and you never want to invest too heavily in either side. If you invest too much onto the short term, you'll end up like Doug Wilson during his last few years as San Jose Sharks general manager, where you are scratching and clawing, just trying to get back into a playoff spot, and you end up delaying the inevitable for your team and making things significantly worse like he did. But if you end up investing too much into the long term, and you end up only thinking 5 to 10 years ahead, who cares what happens over these next couple of seasons, we're planning for 2030, well, we know there's a couple of franchises currently in the league that have done that, and they've definitely struggled for a considerable amount of time. So I'm not sitting here to say that Mike Grier's moves and his plan so far is going to work perfectly. You never know what might end up happening, but what I will say is that over these next 5-10 years, in the foreseeable future for the San Jose Sharks, do not expect them to actually have a tanking season like they have done over these last couple of years. And if they do, I can guarantee it will not be with Mike Grier as general manager, as it would be an indication that he had failed, and they would absolutely fire him for such an offense. Having said all that, Just because the San Jose Sharks aren't necessarily tanking for this next season doesn't mean that they're suddenly a competitive team. It is extremely unlikely that this Sharks team is going to actually be competing for a playoff spot. Many people still predict them to be a bottom 5 team this upcoming year, and there are even some who truly believe the Sharks will once again repeat as the last place team. So even though the Sharks have made the moves to improve, they have brought in these young talents, you never really know how things are going to go. The Sharks team is rather unpredictable with a lot of these newer names on the roster, and so it is entirely possible that the Sharks will still end up with a very, very good draft pick. Going from, a guaranteed minimum 3rd overall with good chances of 1st overall to dropping down to like 4th or 5th overall, sure, that's definitely worse. You might not be able to get your 1st or 2nd choice on your draft board, but it is still definitely going to end up being a successful draft for yourself. You'll still end up with a fantastic player. Look at the Montreal Canadiens this past draft. They got the 2nd best player viewed by many, Ivan Demidov, out of Russia. So it is certainly still a very nice boost to your team to have a higher draft pick. And so the Sharks being able to accomplish that while also creating a bit of excitement and a bit of hype around this team is, I think, a good thing, because for the first time in the last 4 years, me as a Sharks fan, I am actually excited to watch this team play. Last year, we only got to really watch William Eklund, which was nice, but not really overshadowing the amount of losses that they faced. A couple of years back, there was like Meyer and Carlson, sort of, but the only excitement for those two players was the fact that you knew if they would do well, it would increase their value in future trades. But now, being able to watch the future of the San Jose Sharks at work here with a couple of these young players, maybe even a couple that will play near the end of the season, that's something I look forward to. That's something that will put butts in seats in the arena in SAP Center this season for San Jose, and it is truly the turning point of the year. And Mike Grier, maybe it's not the correct move, maybe he should have tanked again, but I can definitely see the reasoning for why he hasn't, and we can only hope now that it works out. Class dismissed.